Hi and welcome to another narration presented by yours truly, Cryptid's Roost. Let's just take a moment's silence for all the haters. That's enough. Be sure to check out the blooper reel at the end of the video, which is then followed by the end screen where you will find more videos listed. So grab your coffee, sit back and enjoy the show. And don't forget, where fear is, happiness is not. I followed the GPS on my stolen motorcycle, part 3, the finale, Molly's house. This awesome series is written by the Reddit author, Moto-XL. Moto-XL also has their very own YouTube channel where they also narrate creepypasta stories. You'll find them listed under the channel name of Moto Camping Stories. That link will also be listed below, so be sure to check them out. Nothing in particular roused me awake, but I came to and blinked a few times. My head felt like a cherry bomb had gone off inside it, and I groaned. Looking around, I saw there was one window on the right wall of the room. Bare wooden planks comprised the floor, and an open door was behind me. The walls were also made of wood, but the boards used were uneven and bumpy, as if various pieces of trees had been chopped up and plastered together, without any attempt to sand or smooth them. Dappled across the uneven wall were hundreds of symbols that had to have been carved with one of Molly's claws. Thinking of her, I started to panic. I assumed I would have been tied up in preparation of some new and horrific ritual, but I was free. Nothing bound me to the wooden chair I was in, so I stood and checked the window. It was barred and without glass, but I could see that the sun was starting to rise, staining the bellies of the clouds in the sky, pink and purple and navy. I exited the room with caution, wondering if I had been left alone because either Chevy or Molly were nearby. Outside the first room was a larger room that made up the bulk of the bottom floor. There was a kitchen in the far corner, but it was pulled out from the wall and didn't appear to be hooked up to anything. There was no furniture and the walls were covered in similar symbols to the room I had woken up in. There were also a few empty shelves and windows scattered throughout. Light from the rising sun cast long silhouettes off the windows onto the floor and reminded me of cages. There was another small room opposite the kitchen, but I couldn't see inside of it. In between the room and the kitchen was a staircase. The front door was to my left and I ran up to it. My heart sank a little as I realised it had been padlocked shut. The body of the lock was as big as my fist, and the shackle was as thick as my finger. It was fastened to a latch as long as my arm that was bolted to the wall and half the door. There was no way I was going to break it down. I needed the key. Walking as carefully as I could and wincing at every squeak of the floorboards, I made my way to the other room. It was essentially empty, but the floor was covered in puddles of blood, and all of the symbols had what I assumed to be strips of flesh jammed into them. Turning my attention to the kitchen, I checked behind the stove, but found nothing. I checked inside the stove, and the door screeched a little when I opened it. Inside, crumpled into a ball, was a human body, and seeing it made me jump. I looked around and strained my ears to see if I could detect any sounds or signs of movement in the house. Nothing registered, so I made my way to the steps and tiptoed up them. Broken up by a small landing, the steps doubled back about halfway up. In front of the top of the steps was another small landing that was in front of a large room. The room had no door, and as I walked inside, my heart turned into a galloping horse within my chest. Molly was sitting in a wooden chair with her back to the doorway. her arms hanging at her sides with the backs of her wrists on the wooden floor. A single shelf ran along the perimeter of the room, and there was a window at the centre of 3 of the walls. If the key wasn't inside this room, I didn't know what I would do to escape. I had to force myself to take each step, and I grew increasingly shaky as I made my way around the room, searching for the key. I kept glancing at Molly as I went, anticipating her gaze to lock onto me at any second. As I went further around the room, I realised that Molly was staring at something. Displayed at her feet was a withered flower. The stem faced her, but below the flower petals was a creature that resembled Molly in every way, except that it was a quarter of her size. It was curled in the fetal position. I was unable to tell if it was alive or dead. Molly's bulging eyes were fixed on the bodies before her as if contemplating something. Beads of sweat turned to streams as I saw my worst fears are realised. The key that had to be to the front door was sitting on Molly's lap. I reached out a shaky hand, and it took everything inside of me to keep from turning into a sobbing mess. As I neared the key, Molly's eyes snapped up towards me, and every hair on my body stood on end. My skin crawled and my heart pounded harder and faster until I could feel my pulse in my ears. Aside from the eye movement, nothing else changed. All was quiet except the distant sound of creaking branches. Whimpering, I pushed my hand forward and grabbed the key. Molly never broke her gaze with me, and I retracted with wide eyes, wondering how I was still alive. I started to make my way back towards the door, and Molly's eyes started jerking back and forth between me and the bodies on the floor. I stopped the first time she did it, questioning if I could make it to the door before she could swing one of her arms around to hit me. When she didn't move any other parts of her body, I again eased towards the door. Then Molly stood up. The sound of the creaking branches grew a little louder, and I ran. I hit the steps and tripped, tumbling down and hitting the wall on the landing before the stairs doubled back. It hurt, but I pushed up from the landing and essentially hopped down the remaining steps to the floor. I sprinted to the front door and fumbled with the lock, trying to quiet my heart so I could hear if Molly was pursuing me. The creak of the floorboards told me she was. After what felt like hours, I finally got the key in and turned. I wrenched off the padlock and flew open the latch, yanking the door open and jumping outside. A small dirt road snaked out away from the cabin. The grass around the cabin was fairly long, and I expected to hear crickets or locusts or anything, but all was silent save for the constant sound of creaking branches. Looking to my left, I saw Chevy. He had a rag in his hand and was standing beside my motorcycle. He saw me and lowered his head, smirking for a moment before charging towards me. The sound of dry leaves rustling in the wind reached me, and my heart continued to race inside my chest. The last time I heard the sound of rustling leaves, Molly was running towards me, and I assumed the same was happening at that moment. Chevy pulled out his knife when he neared me and thrust it forward. I sidestepped, and he lost his balance when he tried to compensate, falling on his stomach with a thud. I figured he would have the key to my bike, and my bike would be the only way I could escape. So I flipped him over and cocked back a fist, ready to punch his nose into the back of his head. But when I flipped him over, I saw that he had fallen on the knife. It appeared to have punctured his lung. I took it out and plunged it into where I thought his heart was. He exhaled one last time. The rustling sound of dry leaves grew louder as I checked his pockets. I found the key and sprinted to my bike. When the engine turned over, my whole body sighed in relief, and I hit the throttle just as Molly burst through the front door. I headed for the dirt road and was grateful to see her get smaller and smaller. When I reached the highway, I gunned it until I hit 100. I started crying at the taste of freedom and the feeling of the wind whooshing around my face. The skin around where my ear had been started to sting, and I remembered the ear had been bitten off earlier, but I was happy to be alive. To feel the wind on my face and hear the sound of it washing over me was a relief. But something was wrong. The sounds grew louder and louder, and as I continued, I found it was difficult to differentiate the sound of the wind from the sound of rustling dry leaves. And I hope you all enjoy the following blooper reel. Dappled across the uneven wall were hundreds of symbols that had to have been carved with one of Molly's claws. And all of the symbols had what I assumed to be strips of flesh jammed into them. Inside, crumpled into a ball, was a human body, and seeing it made me jump. I kept glancing at Molly as I was anticipating her. I kept glancing at Molly as I went, anticipating her gaze to lock onto me at any second. Aside from the eye movement, nothing else changed. I hit the steps and tripped, tumbling down and hitting the wall on the... I hit the steps and tripped, tumbling down and hitting the wall on the landing before the stairs doubled back. A small dirt road snaked out away from the cabin. Chevy pulled out his knife when he neared me, and thrust it forward. It appeared to have punctured his lung. The skin around where my ear had started to sting. And I remembered the ear had been bitten off earlier. Hey family, please be so kind as to punch the like button and smack the arse of the subscription button as well. And remember to chokehold that notification bell and then select all. That way you'll receive all notifications each time I upload a new video. And by subscribing, you'll be the first to see all of our new spooky creepypasta stories. A very big thank you to Moto-XL for allowing me to narrate this awesome series. Make sure to check out Moto-XL's Reddit for more brilliant stories. Also be sure to check out the Moto-XL playlist here for more of their stories that I have already narrated. I would just like to say a very big thank you to all of the authors that I have worked with and all the ones that I will work with in the future. So thank you all, my brothers and sisters. And why not hashtag cryptidsroost in your comments. If you would like to support the channel, I have an account at buymeacoffee.com. You can send your coffee donations, big or small, to that site, link is below, or via paypal.me/cryptidsroost. And don't forget to check out the end screen, see above, that will also list some more videos in my back catalogue. Take care everyone, and I hope you all have a wonderful and peaceful night. And don't forget, where fear is, happiness is not.